Hey everyone, before we dive into today's stories, let's set an ambitious goal. Can we hit 200 likes on this video? Smashing that like button not only supports the channel, but it also helps us bring more stories your way. So go ahead, tap that like button, and let's make it happen. The Inheritance. When my estranged great-aunt Charlotte passed away, I was surprised to learn she had left me her sprawling Victorian mansion in the Louisiana bayou. I'd only met her a few times as a child before my family cut ties. They chalked her peculiar ways up to mental illness. Still, free inheritance trumped old gossip, so I decided to make the trip down to claim my new property. Driving the winding dirt road out to the remote estate, I began having second thoughts. Gray wisps of Spanish moss hung like shrouds from warped oak limbs along the way. The air itself seemed to grow heavier, laden with the swamp's decay. When I finally reached the house, it loomed over me. The peeling paint, dusty windows, and overgrown vines seemed oddly sinister. My unease only grew as I explored the interior. All the furniture was draped in yellowing sheets covered in a thick layer of dust. The air hung stale and oppressive, hinting at secrets better left buried. Strangest of all, every mirror in the house was shattered. Jagged shards littered the floors beneath the empty frames. They crunched under my footsteps as I wandered the winding halls, gaping at the strangeness of it all. In the study, I found Aunt Charlotte's will and deed leaving me sole ownership of the estate. No other family had bothered to claim it after her death. Flipping through old photo albums, I caught glimpses of who she used to be before isolation consumed her. The bright, smiling girl in those pictures seemed worlds away from the frail recluse my family whispered about. What had changed her? I decided to spend the night rather than driving all the way back. The place needed airing out anyway. As I prepared the dusty master suite to sleep in, I noticed strange symbols carved into the bedposts. They almost seemed occult. I shook off my unease. The idle etchings of an old woman, nothing sinister. I drank some wine to steady my nerves before bed that night, trying to ignore the odd creaks and groans of the old house. But sleep did not come easy. Bleak moonlight spilled through the shears, casting twisting shadows across the room. The place felt unnervingly still, void of life or spirit. Eventually, I drifted off out of pure exhaustion. But then I jolted awake in the dead of night to the sound of whispered chanting. My heart froze. It seemed to drift through the halls, guttural and rhythmic. I huddled under the blankets, pulse racing. Had I imagined it? But no. There it was again, echoing faintly down the corridor outside my room. Unable to stand it any longer, I leapt out of bed to investigate. I followed the eerie murmurs toward their source, the hidden door in the library. Someone was down in the forbidden room Aunt Charlotte had always warned me to steer clear of as a child. The chanting grew louder as I descended the narrow staircase into the musty darkness. Strange fumes stung my eyes. Rounding a corner, I stumbled upon a nightmarish scene in the chamber below. 5 robed figures stood circled around some abhorrent shrine, swaying and reciting dark incantations by torchlight. Horrible animal masks concealed their faces. At my gasp, their ritual ceased, and they all turned toward me in unison. Fear crushed my chest under the weight of their collective gaze. The tallest figure drew a gleaming silver blade from his robe. I recoiled, but icy hands grabbed my shoulders from behind, holding me in place. I thrashed vainly against their preternatural strength as the knife rose before me in offering to some unseen god. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the yawning darkness. Right before the plunge, I jolted awake in bed, drenched in sweat. Just another nightmare, I told myself. But my hands still shook from the memory. I knew I wouldn't be sleeping again that night. Over the next few days, I focused on restoring the place to habitable conditions. It kept my mind off the unexplained unease that lingered below the surface. I cleaned, repaired furnishings, tore down creepers outside. A sense of accomplishment replaced my earlier disquiet. Soon, Aunt Charlotte's lawyer arrived to go over remaining details. As we sat in the parlor sipping tea, I asked him, "Any idea why all the mirrors are broken?" His gaze turned grim. In her later years, your aunt suffered a severe psychotic break. She claimed to see visions in the reflections here, ghosts that haunted her. I digested this with a frown. Did she say what they wanted from her? I know it sounds absurd, but Charlotte was convinced they were trying to possess her. She smashed every mirror to deny them entry. His tone made it clear he doubted her delusional fears. I nodded absently, a nagging dread creeping up my spine. I glanced at the uncovered parlor mirror as we left the room. For a moment, I thought I saw the drapes flutter oddly in its cracked surface. A draft, I told myself. Just a draft. That night I dreamed I was wandering the mansion's endless halls, glimpsing movement in broken shards littering my path. Each time I paused to look, only my own frightened eyes stared back. But the sense of being watched clung to me even after I woke. Over the next week I dove into renovations to distract myself. But one afternoon while cleaning the attic, I made an unsettling discovery. Hidden under the eaves was a worn journal, property of Charlotte Leroux. With trembling fingers, I opened it and began reading my aunt's frantic scrawl. She wrote of seeing pale flickering shapes in every reflective surface, vacant faces pressing against the glass from within, trying to get out. They spoke to her in rasping whispers only she could hear, begging her to open the door. She feared mirrors were doorways to another realm, and having so many in the old mansion meant she was surrounded by portals to the beyond. Smashing them all was the only way to barricade herself in. I dropped the journal like it had burned me. Could Aunt Charlotte's delusions have been grounded in truth? Had she desperately tried warning me away from this place? My breaths grew panicked and shallow. I rushed downstairs, eager for sunlight to drive away the creeping dread. But that evening, while washing dishes in the kitchen, the sensation of being watched returned full force. My skin prickled as if from an icy breeze. Against my better judgment, I glanced up at the window, where my own reflection glared back pale and hollow-eyed. I leapt away with a gasp, but the phantom image just smiled bitterly. When I blinked, it was gone. Hands shaking, I grabbed a rolling pin from the counter to shatter the pane and deny it entry. As broken glass rained down, distant laughter echoed through the halls. Cold, mocking, inhuman. I considered fleeing right then and there. But where would I go? The deed was already done. The estate was mine whether I wanted it or not. Unable to leave, I resolved to avoid reflective surfaces altogether until I could arrange an exorcism. It was the only way to reclaim my inherited home from these vengeful spirits. I covered all remaining mirrors with heavy cloths and prayed for the days to pass quickly until help arrived. But I could not evade the watching eyes so easily. Their icy presence followed me constantly now, heavy with malevolent intent. I drank myself to sleep each night, trying vainly to numb my escalating dread. Soon, not even the refuge of intoxication spared me from the horrors stalking my dreams. I was trapped in the mansion, being chased through abandoned halls by pale, shrieking ghosts. I jolted awake in a cold sweat night after night, clinging to my last shreds of sanity, certain I was not alone in the darkness. After a week of running from the presences I could feel but not see, I came to a decision. I would confront the forces terrorizing me directly. The waiting was driving me mad. At least facing them head-on offered a shred of control. So late that night I sat alone in the parlor with all the cloth-covered mirrors arranged in a circle before my chair. My hands trembled as I uncovered each one slowly. I steeled my nerves, watching for any flickers of movement. Once they were all exposed, I waited, barely breathing. It did not take long. Shadowy shapes began passing behind the glass, black-eyed and frantic, clawing to get out. I forced myself to sit very still, even as my pulse threatened to hammer out of my chest. Soon, her withered face appeared in the mirror directly across from me. My dead Aunt Charlotte, gazing at me sadly from within the darkness. My resolve faltered upon seeing her trapped spirit. "Let us in, David," she said. "Will you please end our suffering?" Her voice echoed unnaturally, as if carrying across a great void. But before I could respond, More twisted faces crowded the frames around me. They began chanting all at once in a chaotic cacophony, pressing so close I feared the glass might break. "Join us. Free us. You are cursed like us." I pressed my hands to my ears, unable to stand the awful din. Squeezing my eyes shut, I screamed for the tortured spirits to leave me in peace. But they only howled louder in a frenzied chorus, drowning out all thought and reason. When I opened my eyes again, I was slumped over on the parlor floor. All the mirrors were securely recovered around me. Had I just dreamt the encounter? But glancing down, I gasped in horror. My arms were covered in bleeding scratches and raw welts, as if many hands had tried to claw their way out from within my skin. I knew then I had to leave this place. The ghosts would never rest as long as I remained in their domain. Let them keep the mansion. My only goal was to escape with my soul intact. I packed frantically, praying I could get away before nightfall. As I turned to leave, catching a glimpse of myself in the dusty foyer mirror made me freeze. The glass cracked slowly down the middle before my eyes, and two gaunt, empty-eyed spirits stared back, grinning in triumph. They had succeeded at last in escaping their prison. I was too late. The dark forces I unleashed in Aunt Charlotte's house latched onto me that fateful night, following me even after I fled the estate. I have not seen their spectral faces again in mirrors since I left, but I can feel them inside me, threading their icy claws through the fabric of my being. No exorcism has managed to pry them loose from my soul. I fear that by disregarding my aunt's warnings, I wandered into a trap set long before I was born. Aunt Charlotte sacrificed her sanity to contain the evil dwelling in that mansion. In my arrogance, I undid all she suffered to achieve. Now the spirits have circumvented their prison by using my body as a vessel to walk freely in the world of the living once more. I am but a hollow shell they puppet as they please to work their malignant will. Their hatred for the living fuels them to spread their corruption further each day. I have tried to warn my family of the sinister forces I have unleashed, but they merely shake their heads and tell me I have come undone, just as our poor aunt did in the end. Perhaps I have. There are times when I can no longer tell where the invading spirits end and my own battered soul begins. We are merging into a single tormented entity. Soon, I fear I will surrender my last shred of free will, becoming merely a mask they wear to walk among mankind. But one thing is certain. Where I go, more broken mirrors, more desiccated souls are sure to follow. They are here among us now, staring out from familiar faces, waiting for those whose names are written in blood to invite them across the threshold, so that they may infest the land of the living once more. Avoid mirrors after dark. Look not over your shoulder at what may follow you in the gloom. And never, ever take inheritance in a home not your own, for those who clutch us fiercely even in death are not so easily escaped. Well, that's it, folks. I really hoped you enjoyed this story and it didn't scare you too much. If you're enjoying these spine-tingling tales and want to dive even deeper into the world of suspense and horror, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll be the first to hear our latest eerie stories and embark on thrilling audio journeys with us. Don't miss out on a single shiver or chill. Subscribe now and become part of our ever-growing community of horror enthusiasts.